This time I'd like to call the work session to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. There is a need for executive session personnel. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I have a motion by Ms. Young, second by Ms. Yonts to approve the agenda. All those in favor raise your hand. 7-4 and none opposed. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Yonts, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I have no cards for recognizing visitors for comments. Next item, Superintendent's Cabinet reports. Mr. Altrue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent's Cabinet's updates will consist of the Office of Teaching and Learning, and welcome to our newest Cabinet member, Ms. Leslie DeMarco. Office of School Improvement, Mr. Eugene Baker. Office of Support Services, Dr. Garrett Brundage. Office of Operational Services, Mr. Phil Budensee. Office of Financial Services, Mr. Lee Davis. And Office of Community Relations, Ms. Cindy Ball. Mr. Marco.
Good evening, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chairperson, and members of the board. Glad to be here tonight. And so I want to bring you an update from the Division of Teaching and Learning, and specifically report to you about some of our summative data from the CRCT for grades 1 through 8. And I always drive this thing backwards, so let me get oriented. First slide gives you an overview of the performance in the 4 core academic areas for grades 3 through 8. And I'm proud to say that we outperformed the state in every single grade and in every single content area. So I think that's quite an accomplishment, and it is just a result of the hard work of our teachers and building leaders and students and their families as well. The other thing I'd point out on this slide is in the area of reading and language arts. Not only did we outperform the state, but we met our own performance targets of 90% plus in meeting and exceeding standards in every single grade for both reading and language arts. And as you kind of scan down those columns, there are some very high levels of performance represented there. Yes, sir.
Question. On the math, grade 8, and science, grade 4, grade 8, especially on the math, why does the passing, I guess, go up and then all of a sudden go down?
A couple of things that I would say, we historically, and you can see the trend is in the state level results too. In the 9th grade, students typically have an easier time with the concepts in that math curriculum. And then in the 8th grade, they begin to move more into the higher level math, the statistics, and things of that nature, and so they do struggle. But we do know that we have some work to do in the area of math. Thank you. So we'll start out looking at some trend data. Ms. Ball, can you, is that, it's on the screen, that it's a little off. But anyway, this is trend data from elementary reading, and this shows our, that's okay, I'm just going to kind of talk and while y'all adjust that, but this shows the trend data for all students and also our economically disadvantaged students. The blue trend line demonstrates the performance of all of our students over about the past decade, and the red line is the performance of economically disadvantaged students. And again, what you don't see there, this is for elementary reading overall, okay? And then along the bottom of the graph, that shows the growth in the percentage of our student population that is economically disadvantaged. And so the significance here is that if you read lots of research and lots of what people predict, it is that as the economically disadvantaged population grows, then performance tends to decrease. But that is not the case in our county. We're proud to say, we like to talk about defying the norm. I'm sure I'm not the first person who's ever used that term with you. But this particular year, for example, all students, 95% were proficient, and our economically disadvantaged students were 94% of them were proficient. So the gap is minimal. I mean, if you can even say that is a gap. It's not statistically significant. This slide shows the ethnic demographic breakdown, and I'm sort of glad that those numbers are jumbled and you can't really see them, because what that means is the gap is not very wide. So if they were all distinct, that means we'd have a pretty distinct gap. But you can see that even our lowest performing subgroup up there is still over 90% meeting and exceeding. So the next slide is, this is language arts, overall elementary. So they're tested separately in reading and language arts at the elementary level. That's incorrect. This is math, excuse me. This is math for elementary. And the math, overall, our students are at 88% proficient, and for our economically disadvantaged, they're at 86%. So we want both of those lines to be over 90%, but we generally are trending up. We took a little dip this year, 2 points, and so we're anxious to get that line turned up again. This is the elementary math disaggregated data by ethnic subgroup. Again, there's not a huge gap in the students' performance, but we do want all subgroups to be over that 90% line. When we think about that data, the most important part about that data is what we're going to do about it. I'm proud to say in Rockdale County we have moved well beyond just looking at numbers and analyzing those numbers. What we need to do is let that data mobilize us in terms of service to students and parents and teachers. And so part of our plan will involve lots of professional learning, and as Mr. McKinney noticed, a lot of that will be targeted toward math, because that's the area in elementary that we know we have some room to grow especially. You are probably familiar with our efforts with the math-science partnership, that we've been doing that with secondary folks for a while, but last year we implemented that professional learning effort with elementary teachers in 4th and 5th grades, and they embraced it enthusiastically. It is a partnership with Georgia Tech where teachers engage in deepening their content expertise, which is very important for elementary teachers. Oftentimes they come with a literacy focus, and so they really appreciate deepening their content knowledge in math and science, so that when they go to teach the boys and girls, they have a good understanding of the higher levels that those students will face. Also, number talks is a specific type of professional learning that we're going to bring to our teachers. What we notice when we dig very deeply into this data is that at 4th and 5th grade particularly, the students struggle in the area of number sense, which involves fractions. And so what we understand is that many times the students, they can follow the script, but they don't understand the concept of fraction and geometry, and they don't understand how that might apply. And so because of that, if they don't have a good foundation in that, when they enter into algebra and some of the more advanced statistical and geometric concepts later, the gap only gets larger. So the number talks is a specific type of professional learning to help teachers develop a conceptual understanding of those mathematics concepts in the young students. As always, our focus is on job-embedded professional learning. Certainly we do have event-type professional learning where teachers come out of the classroom and engage in that. But we know that one of the most effective ways to deliver that is to go into the classroom, send content area specialists into those classrooms with teachers, and they work side by side with the teachers and work with students. And that's the most sustaining type of professional learning. And I think that our district is unique in understanding that and providing resources for that. And so I know the Teaching and Learning Division appreciates those resources, and the teachers do too. Anytime we can do the right now training, that's the best for students and teachers. Certainly this year, we're going to implement the Common Core Georgia Performance Standards, which are even more ramped up than our previous standards. And so we will continue to focus on that. That'll be a huge training initiative this year. And certainly we're going to focus on those mathematical practices and larger concepts and shifts that will happen with Common Core. We also will be reviewing our instructional time devoted to science and social studies for particularly our students with disabilities. We know that these groups need some extra assistance. We want to make sure, though, that we're not providing extra math and language arts assistance to the expense of science and social studies. And there are lots of ways that we can work with those students to ensure that. We also will be extending the MSP cohort to 3rd grade. We will be providing some in the building professional learning in the domains of history and economics concepts. And the next bullet is something that will be a year-long emphasis, and that is helping teachers integrate science and social studies into language arts and helping them use those informational related content areas to develop language arts skills. The writing prompts will be more based in science and social studies to get them familiar and able to access those content area concepts. So now I will shift to middle school. Oh, before I do that, these are our performance targets for elementary, and they are based on our performance, the summative results that I just shared with you. Always our goal is going to be to have 90% or more of our students meeting and exceeding standards. Certainly we want to be realistic in our goals, and so for some of our subgroups that may not have performed as well as we would have liked, we may adjust that performance target temporarily. But our ultimate goals for our ultimate goals for 100% of them to meet and exceed, but definitely 90% is our standard. And now I'll shift to middle school. This is middle school reading. And this represents 6th, 7th, and 8th grade reading results. And you can see here again, the performance was very high. All students, 97%, were proficient. And for the economically disadvantaged students, 96%. So very high performance, and the trend line just keeps going up. This is the disaggregated information for middle school reading. And again, virtually no gap. And I really want to say that I'm very, proud of that for our district. That is not a common graph that you would see. This is the math performance for middle school, all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade combined. 89% proficient for all students and 86% proficient for economically disadvantaged. Again, we're not satisfied until we get over that 90% mark. However, we are outperforming the state. So I think that's worthy to mention. And we've done that, again, in spite of the fact that our economically disadvantaged populations have grown dramatically over a decade. This is the math information for middle school disaggregated. Some of our subgroups are above 90%. Some, the Asian subgroup very high. We have several subgroups, though, above 90%, but we need all those subgroups above 90%. In middle school, how we're going to put this data into action. Again, we want to look at our students with disabilities and make sure that they are at ever-increasing rates exposed to the regular ed curriculum through more inclusion models. We know that that works. We've seen that work, and it makes a huge difference in the achievement levels of those students when they can be part of the regular curriculum. We need an increased, or we will have an increased emphasis on content area reading and writing. That is part of what will come through with Common Core. And speaking of that, we again will begin to implement a focus on content area literacy. Science and social studies both have literacy standards in the Common Core. Grades 6 through 8 math professional development will focus on statistics and probability. That's the area that begins to be quite problematic for middle school students in mathematics. And we will look at restructuring our self-contained models to provide increased content area specializations. And what I mean by that is for those students with disabilities who have to have a limited participation in the regular education, we're going to look at how to help those teachers specialize so that they can provide a higher level of content area study for those students. And our performance targets for middle school for this year, again, these are based on our performance now and where we believe we can go. You can see, again, most of them are at 90%. In some of the areas where performance was significantly lower, we have adjusted that performance target to be realistic, but they're still quite rigorous. And before Mr. Baker comes to talk about high school, are there any questions?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
Those are great results on the schools where you broke down from 3 through 8. And, do you have that with the individual schools? I'd like to see how each individual school did on those.
Sure, we can make that available to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Can you also forward this information forward if it's not on the board agenda for today?
This PowerPoint was not? Okay.
All the PowerPoints will be
Forward
provided to.
back.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Those are easy. Okay. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I brought my support up here just in case we don't get the resolution fixed. This evening, I'd like to update you in 5 areas. It is a good bit of data, but as we go through, and it looks like we still have a problem with the top of the slides being cut off. First, I would like to take you into the EOCT courses. The first EOCT that you see here is our 9th grade literature. I'm going to show you 2 views of each of these. I'm going to show you all students compared to the state, and then I will show you the disaggregated into subgroups, which is a lot more confusing. So the first slide is really to give you a good fix of exactly where we are. We still have a lot of progress to make in our EOCTs, and we have a lot of areas of focus and concern there. In 9th grade literature, you can see that in 2010-11, we were at 87. This last year, we performed at 86%. That was above the state, but it is below our expectations, and it's trending, as you can imagine, in the wrong direction for us, although 1 percentage point is not near as significant. This is the same data disaggregated into subgroups, the way we always do. You can see the historical trend. I want to point something out that you'll see on all the disaggregations, and that is that the economically disadvantaged data, you'll see it looks as if it's in last year coming from 0 up, and that is because the state did not provide us with the economically disadvantaged data for our EOCTs until this year, and so we don't have a historical basis to give you the comparison there.
One question.
Yes, sir.
Which school is this? Is this middle school or high school?
Sir, this is our high school with our EOCT, our end of course
High
test.
school.
Yes, sir. And this is 9th grade language arts. You can see that Our students with disability and our ELL students are not performing as well as our other students, and you can see obviously that our economically disadvantaged, that even though we're starting to cluster at the top, we have quite a bit of growth to do there. This next slide is our American literature. Again, you will see that in American literature, last year we were at 89, this year we're at 90. We're just touching our standard. We are above the state. We expect to grow even faster. However, when you look at the disaggregated, again, you can see that we need to close the gap significantly in order to improve these scores. You'll notice again that the economically disadvantaged towards the bottom, which is our largest group of students, as well as our ELL students and our SWD students. So quite a bit of work to do there. The next slide is our Math 1. Again, the system did improve over last year's performance, and we were above the state. We put a tremendous amount of emphasis on Math 1 last year, but 67% is nowhere near what we expect, and obviously there's still quite a bit of growth to be made there.
Now, question, when's the new math coming in? Don't we have a new math that's coming in sometime?
Well, this is compared to what we used to have. This is a different math than what would have been in the high schools when I was in school and you were in school. However, there is another reorganization of the math which is coming out. We went from having math where you had very separated content, so you had pre-algebra, algebra, geometry, and then they went to integrated math. This is representing that integrated approach, and the state is taking us back to a less integrated approach, though it is more integrated than it was when you and I were in school. And again, the disaggregation, you can see our economically disadvantaged, our largest group, low performing, and quite a bit of gap between our subgroups, so obviously a lot of work that has to be done there. This is our Math 2. I want to explain this. This looks slightly different, and that's because we're actually showing you two sets of data, because it can be confusing so that you're comparing apples to apples. The red line going from 55 to 54 is the state performance on the Math 2 end-of-course test. The blue line is our performance in the spring, comparing exactly to the state as far as time period, going from 58 to 43. However, that doesn't tell the whole story. We also administer this test throughout the year, and all these results are our spring results. This last year, we had our accelerated students test in December after they finished going through the Math 2 content. That's where the score of 58 came from. However, the year before we had them test in December. And so we had a drop because we tested a large group of our students at two different times, and their performance counted in at a different time. So showing you apples to apples as far as time period would be the blue line and the red line. Showing you apples to apples as far as our student population who tested would be the red line and the green dash line, which goes from 49 to 51. That's our all-student performance over those tests. Again, that is, I know that is confusing. We were trying to think of a simple way to show it graphically. That makes the disaggregation of the data even more difficult, because this is based on time period, spring compared to spring. The state does not release, and the state does not dictate when students take that test or any of the EOC tests, and so you have windows. So, yes?
Just to make sure I'm understanding this, that means that the Asian that's on the right-hand column, 67, and the Hispanic is 34?
Hispanics are, give me just a second to,
I mean, what?
yes, sir, you're
is that-
correct.
Is that the
Asians
score on
are-
the test they made?
That is the average score for students
No,
of,
sir, that's the percentage.
Percentage.
that met or exceeded,
That's the percentage of students in that subcategory that met
or exceeded.
or exceeded.
Oh, okay.
But this comparison is time period to time period. So this is without our accelerated students added into last year's data. Okay? This was without our accelerated students last year were not in this disaggregation. And the state has not released that disaggregation yet. In other words, we do not have this information from the state. And the data we show you is always state data. The next in-the-course test is in the area of biology. You can see the state was above us the year previous and last year. We went from 66 to 70, but again, we're still underperforming the state. It's trending in the right direction, but still not acceptable to us. And you can see, as this is disaggregated, that, again, we have large gaps in between our subgroups and a lot of work to do to close that. Trending in the right direction, but still a lot of work to do. In physical science, our performance from year to year was flat. The state was performing above us and trending upwards. And you can start to see that as you look again at our subgroup analysis. I know it's very confusing to see that many trend lines, but if you'll notice the economically disadvantaged at 65, that really is counting for the bulk of our students. So we have to get better at presenting our instruction. This is our economics. Again, we went from 65 to 63, trending in the wrong direction, but in both years underperforming the state, which you can see at 72 and 77. This is our disaggregation. Again, great large gaps between our subgroups. Our U.S. history, our performance was flat. We stayed from 68 to 68. The state went from 66 to 69. Again, not coming close to our expectation of 90%. And then our disaggregation of the United States history. What are we going to be doing with this data? Turning this data into action from a professional learning side in all the content areas. We have professional development that is focused to specific target areas within those. And that differs somewhat from school. We have some that are across the district, but also special needs within in different schools of certain areas. We are presenting the Common Core Georgia Performance Standard training by content area to all of our teachers as we go forward. In mathematics courses in Math 1 and 2, we'll be doing math preview with our teachers, where coaches are pushing in to work with our teachers in previewing the data and planning out the next lessons to accelerate and get past ahead of where we are. In economics, all of our teachers will be attending the Georgia Economic Council workshop. We'll be conducting that training. 2 of our high schools are doing the same in the United States history. We're also using individual student interventions during our flex time. That is targeted interventions for individualized students based on the standards which they are missing on formative assessments as we're going through. It is reteaching. Additionally, in the case of economics in particular, we had not had a district professional learning community, and starting in pre-planning, we brought all of the economics teachers together to start planning the economics courses going forward. That is a fairly small community of teachers that we do not have a lot of economics teachers. And probably one of the things that's going to have one of the largest impacts is what is called Motivate to Graduate, which are in each of our high schools. We have committees that have been set up that are focused on the caseloads concerning particularly our students with disability, every day reviewing their attendance, their discipline, their grades, and their mastery of standards, and determining what interventions are working for them in a very short response timeline before those students start to get behind. Moving into our performance targets, this looks slightly different than it has in the past because of the changes that have come down from the state. You'll see that we still have the same targets in our graduation writing test. However, we've also added the 4-year graduation rate, which we did not have in the past, as well as the 5-year graduation rate, which we did not have in the past and which we do not have the formula for yet. So we don't have a way of calculating the baseline data for that. Also, we have performance targets in each of our EOCT courses, again, where we take the baseline of their performance from the previous year and then set the goals for this year. These are the last 4 of the end of course tests. I also wanted to give a little more of an update concerning advanced placement. Last month I did mention to you the scholar information. However, we have been reporting each year the growth in advanced placement students. This is the trend line since we started that. This year there are 2,332 sections of AP being taught in our high schools today. You can see that the growth rate has dropped off slightly, but we are still increasing the number of students, and when you consider that we have not had large changes in our student population, this means that we are recruiting more students. Although I have given you some of this information before, one of the common things that is said when we talk about the expansion of advanced placement is people worry that we're watering down the curriculum, that we're losing the rigor. As I mentioned to you last month, there are what are known as the AP Scholar designations given by the College Board. College Board AP scores range from 1 to 5, if you remember, and there are 4 categories of distinction for AP Scholars. Those are based on the scores of the students and the number of tests which they take. This information you have seen before, but since you were seeing the growth in AP students and sections being taught, I also wanted you to see the growth in AP scores as it goes forward. AP Scholars, which is our lowest level, there has been a 38% growth. AP Scholars with Honors, which is the next level, that's taking 5 courses, 41% growth. AP Scholars with Distinction, 52. The National AP Scholar, which requires you to take 8 courses, it shows a 33% decrease, but that is actually a change of 1 student. So overall, we've had a 39.6% increase in AP Scholars as we've increased students taking advanced placement. I also wanted to report out to you our magnet completion rates. Magnet completion is something we've also been working with, been concerned as we expanded magnet. We began putting safety nets in place to support those students to ensure that they would be successful. And we saw our greatest growth last year as we did that. Even though we've increased the number of students in the program, our completion rate has now risen to 94.7. Since talking about non-traditional, I also wanted to share with you our progress in Open Campus. And again, you see the trend line of students who have graduated from Open Campus who would not have otherwise if we had not had Open Campus. Finally, there is one policy that will be an action item later, and it's really a correction of a reference in the policy so that it refers to the correct other policy, our professional hiring policy. And so we needed to correct the reference.
On your first slide, does that end of course test include those that have come back and taken it, maybe the ones that, the ones that didn't pass?
No, ma'am, it does not. The reason I use the spring administration, which is the largest of the
So all of that was
administrations.
spring administration?
The only thing that was not spring administration, ma'am, was the dashed line that I had
Yes.
on the math
Yes.
too. Other than that, all the scores are spring administration, which is our largest administration, the largest group of students that we give the test to, although we test throughout the year. And the reason for that is the state has not released to us yet the official disaggregated. So we would have been either not sharing as much information, or we would have been giving you apples and oranges. It's fairly confusing as it is with as many data points, but it is very confusing when you're looking at all students. And we have the information for all students, as far as all administrations, but we do not have the disaggregated information for all administrations.
But those are comparisons of state and apples.
Those are apple to apple. Those
So
are
in other
apple
words,
to
those
apple.
are the state scores.
Right.
That's the state spring score.
Yes.
And that's,
Eventually, it should increase. Ours should, due to the fact of those
The
that have
multiple testing.
retaken the end of course test
yes, ma'am.
and passed it.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I get the breakout for the individual schools in at 9 through 12?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have one question going up when you made a comment. I read in the paper the other day about how these people that took this class in the summertime, whatever the classes, you know,
We have a number.
the advanced classes. Well, what you were just talking about,
End of course test?
and yeah. And then they don't seem to be very long. How long is it? How long is it? A week, 2 weeks?
We have intercessions that are shorter, but the student has already completed the entire course.
I
So
understand.
those are literally students going back in with teachers focusing with very specific standards that those students have missed,
Okay,
not
I
reteaching
I understand
the
that.
entire course.
But the question is, let's take math for example.
Yes, sir.
How long would that class have been?
For the end of course test?
Yeah, I mean, they do go to class though, to the study,
Yes,
to
sir.
take this test, right? How long do they study after?
Throughout the school years.
Let me give you
Yeah,
an
Oh,
economics
I
is a-
thought it was
about
after.
summer
My,
retest.
my granddaughter did not pass the end of course test in social studies. So because she didn't pass the end of course test, she did not get her high school preparatory diploma.
All right.
So during the summer, she studied on her own. There was no class for her to study.
Oh.
She studied on her own and got tutored and went back and took the end of course test. And she passed it. Then she gets her diploma. That's why I was asking, because I know there were 10 diplomas issued when she got hers. So there were at least 10 that I know of from Heritage High School alone that passed the end of course
Self-study
test.
is what you're saying,
Well, but they've already taken the class and passed the class.
but not the
But,
test.
you know, it's not like when we went to school, like he said, when you pass the class, you pass. Now, not only do you have to pass the class, you have to pass an end of course test. Now, it's not like us, Don, when we went to school and we made an A or a B or a D or an F or whatever. But they have to pass another test
To get,
to get their diploma.
okay.
So that's called the end of course
Oh.
test. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So she passed it.
How would you feel? Let me rephrase that, sorry. I'm concerned about the disaggregated data and the wide gaps. And as we saw for elementary and middle as well, we are right there together.
Yes, ma'am.
We're missing something.
Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
and I know you're trying to find that, but as a board member sitting here looking at that, it's very disheartening to me, because those gaps, especially against the state, are tremendous. And then to see the gaps from our individual areas, that's very concerning to me. And I know we are trying to find what is going to click, but I'm concerned about those students.
Yes, ma'am.
If I can comment, thank you, Mr. Baker. Ms. Hotchkiss and all the boards, certainly, we realize we've got work to do. work to do at the high school level, please understand that this is the second year that we have required EOCTs, end of course tests. And it's not just one test, it's 8 tests that students have to pass during their high school career. Before, it was the high school graduation test, and again, we can debate what the level of rigor versus the high school graduation test, and now these very specific, content-specific end-of-course tests. So that transition is occurring at the high school. Is it a work in progress with our teachers? Is it a work in progress with our administrators? Absolutely. Are we making the shift from a cabinet perspective in making sure that we're asking the right question and looking at the right interventions? Absolutely. We've revamped, Mr. Baker mentioned, flex time at the high school level. Some of you who are familiar with high school realize that the master schedule at the high school is pretty lockstep. I mean, you've got seat time that you have to meet for Carnegie credit, and there are very few exceptions to that. However, we realized 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that even though we understand the cycle for results and interventions and caseloads were being developed at the high school, our kids weren't coming before school, and our students weren't staying after school to receive such interventions. So all of our high schools now have built in what is called flex time, where we have an adjustment to the master schedule every day so that these students get one-on-one or individualized intervention from content area teachers. If, for instance, Rich Autry doesn't know his standards in biology, there's a biology teacher who may not be his teacher per se, but there's a biology teacher that will be assigned to him to provide extra support and extra assistance in that particular content. So that is, we had a pilot last year at one of our schools. Now we've broadened that out to all 3 of our high schools. So we certainly think that that real-time intervention will yield results, because again, we do understand that the nature of the high school student is not to stick around for extra academic support after school hours. We have to do it when they're in school. So there's calls for celebration, certainly in the 1 through 8 program, and there's certainly calls for our work at the high school level, but that's work that we are accustomed to doing, and that's work that we don't shy away from. And I would share with the board, I need you to understand that my philosophy and our philosophy as a cabinet, we don't hide from areas in which we need to improve, and we certainly celebrate areas in which we have successes. So we're going to show you, and we're going to tell you and be transparent in areas that we need to support, in areas that we need celebration. And you saw some of that, and I will stand here before you and let you know that high school continues to be our focus, not because of the fact that we have a lack of quality in teaching or delivery, but we need to provide continued assistance to help those teachers understand the new curriculum, help those teachers and students understand the new way of accountability. So again, it's ongoing. I wanted Leslie and Jean to provide you closeout from last year so that you know where we're starting, you know areas in which we can improve upon, but also areas in which we have done quite well, and we know that the work has yielded results. So again, that's where we stand. Again, good things, not so good things, but certainly calls for our work as we move forward. Don?
I'm very concerned about children learning, okay?
Sure.
And I think the longer you would have the children in a good system, like you get them first, second, the better chance you have when you get in high school. And is that part of the problem? We're getting a lot of children that don't have something. They're missing something. Because like in high school, it kind of looks like it goes down.
Sure.
Are we, along those lines, we disaggregating any data for the students who transfer into our system?
Yeah, those students are included. Have we pulled those students out, Wills? We don't have that as far as one of our slides here, but we certainly need to look at transiency. how long we've had particular students to see if we've had them long enough to affect
Yeah.
change. But even that, I will tell you that certainly there's ample research to suggest that early intervention, the earlier we get them and the more we have them in our rigorous course of study, the better results we're going to see on the back end. Realize that these students that you're seeing, the curriculum has changed multiple times. And you've heard me over the course of the past several years, the level of rigor has gone much deeper over the last 4 years. So you could safely assume that when these students were in elementary school and early middle school, that level of rigor may or may not have been to the degree that they're being asked to do it now. And I will share with you, that level of rigor is going to increase even more this year with Common Core performance standards. So again, I don't think it's a bad thing that we deepen our level of rigor and understanding for our students and deepen our expectations. But that does require additional training for staff. That does require different ways of doing business that certainly ask us to be agile and mobile in how we make those adjustments. So we'll continue to make those transitions, but I think there's something to what you said, Mr. McKinney, is making sure we reach those kids at the elementary level and middle school level.
Mr. Autry, I want to thank you and the administration for providing, as you said, the positive and the areas that need work, because that is not something that has always happened. And to have that information allows the board to have a better knowledge base when there are budgetary items that are focusing in areas that we know, that we now know need help, need improvement. So it's a
Sure.
great tool. And also the flex time, I can't imagine how you have gotten that into a high school schedule, but we have seen improvement at the middle school level on the flex time. So I have no doubt we'll see that at high school, and that's quite an accomplishment with their schedules.
Your point is well made. We did replicate what we have seen to be successful at the elementary level. You've heard me mention IE blocks at the elementary, intervention and extension blocks, where we do some of the same things. They don't just go lockstep, first period, second period, third period. There are times in which students at middle school and elementary receive support intervention for areas in which they're struggling, but also enrichment if they're high flyers and need stretching and extension. There's times for that. The high school schedule posed a bit of a problem, but we found a way to make it work. Again, we piloted that last year at one of our schools, and so now that whole model, the model of intervention, we think that we have it K-12 now, and hopefully that'll yield the results that we've seen at the K-8 level as well. Dr. Brundage.
Good evening, Chairman Barksdale, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board. I'd like to provide you with some information that you've probably already seen before. It is summary information from the tribunal report from last year, but the difference tonight is that we want to show you, we want to put the results into action, just like you've seen from my colleagues. We want to show you some highlights of some of the initiatives that we have to provide a more proactive approach in terms of support for our schools and focus on not only discipline but changing student behavior. So this is the tribunal trend data from last year. You'll see a 5-year trend. The numbers have really not changed very much. If you'll look at the little pink at the bottom there, those represent waivers as well. If you look at 2012, they represent waivers as well. What happened was those kids came to the tribunal, the day of the tribunal, and for whatever reason, those parents and those kids decided that it would be better for them to accept the consequences or the recommendation of the school. So they went ahead and signed the waiver and went to Alpha from there. I will tell you that even though we're pretty proud of these numbers because it represents less than 1% of our population. That 91, it may increase, and I don't want to scare you, but based on refocusing or focusing on different areas of discipline, those numbers may go up as we visit schools and review discipline information with those the administration at those schools and determine whether or not a placement is needed for a student, whether they're better served in an alternative setting. So I'll highlight that information in some later slides. This is the same information by race. Okay. Yes, sir.
There was 91 up here on the first slide.
Yes, sir.
That's 91
Oh, I'm sorry. These
What is
represent
that?
91 cases, 91
for
tribunal
the
cases.
whole year, for the whole school system?
For the whole year for the whole school system, yes, sir.
Is that a lot or not? I mean, 91, how many thousands?
Well, 91 as compared to 15, 16,000, I think it's fairly small. But we still want to focus on these cases, redirecting these kids, changing the behavior, and getting them on the right track as far as discipline and academics is concerned.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
I think you need to clarify, there's 91 referrals to the tribunal. There's a whole lot more discipline going on in schools because the principals have the authority, legal authority, discretion to suspend students up to 10 days without going to a tribunal. And so, you know, there's a lot more under this in terms of our effort to manage behavior, but these are referrals where the recommendation by the principal has been that they be suspended for more than 10 days.
But do we keep a record of what Jack is talking about?
We do keep a record of that.
So like how many, what's it, roughly, what is it? I mean, I don't.
I'd have to get that information for you. I don't have it right off the top of my head.
What it is and whether you keep a record of that, because that says something too, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mr. Kenny, let me clarify, you want a record of all referrals and all incidents from our school system?
I thought you must keep a record.
Sure we do,
If you don't,
sure we do.
I'd just be interested in seeing it.
No, we're required to do that, and that's part of our normal data analysis anyway, but we certainly can provide you all that information.
Be interested in seeing, but it kind of be a trend, wouldn't it, of what's going on?
I can provide you that in a hard copy. I don't think I can provide that in electronic. It's a huge file. That's the information that's according to gender. And now I want to outline some things that we are focusing on. This is putting the results that we saw and the comprehensive discipline report, that information into action. And these are just 4 areas. They are not all inclusive. This is not the only 4 areas that we're concentrating on, but this is an effort to provide some additional support to the school and focus on changing the behavior of the student. So let's first talk about the school-based discipline. And really, this is the information that Mr. McKinney is referring to, the school-based discipline. It involves reviewing with the principal and assistant principals the comprehensive discipline report, taking a look at those frequent incidents and determining with that administration how we are going to address those issues. We're also looking at those individuals who are frequent flyers, taking a look at their discipline as well with the administration and determining whether or not they need to be alternatively placed immediately or placed on a behavior contract in a conference with the parent, in consultation with the parent, the administration, the parent, and the student, clearly outlining the details of what's expected as far as behavior is concerned, and then providing those students with all the support that they need in order to get on the right track in terms of support services, P&I specialists, mentors, counselors, any program that they may need, Too Good for Drugs, Too Good for Violence, and our 7 Challenges program. If those students need a student support team at that point for discipline, then we will put that in place as well. So we want to focus on changing the student behavior, but also letting it clearly outlining for them and their parents what the expectations are. And then we want to make sure that our administration is prepared for tribunals. And having all these things in place will prepare them for the tribunal. We want to make sure that our administration is involved in the transition either to the alternative setting, but also back, making sure that that student is ready to go back to their home school when that time comes. We're also putting in place right now with the administration at each school an opportunity to review with them. But first of all, we provide them with their comprehensive discipline report every month at the principal's meeting, and we review that, or they review that with their administration. But from my department, Mr. Cherry, who's the school safety director, school safety coordinator, he and I will visit each school every 9 weeks. Now, we're going to visit a whole lot more than that, but specifically every 9 weeks to review their discipline report with them and see at that point what action needs to be taken in terms of placement, contracts, just to do the same thing that we're doing right now as far as concentrating on changing those students' behavior, seeing who are the high flyers at that point, and then getting them on the behavior contract and placed if necessary. Our school-based probation program, this is a partnership with DJJ, really, and these are students who are, this is an opportunity to partner with a community-based organization. They have provided for us 2 school-based probation officers. One will be housed at the Alpha Academy, because we have 22 students at the Alpha Academy that are on probation, and the other one will be housed at Heritage High School and shared with Rockdale. The reason for that is because those are 2 schools with the highest number, according to their records, highest number of students that are on probation. That doesn't mean that Salem is left out. Salem will have, those students will have their probation officer to visit. They just won't be housed on campus. Our case management meetings, these are meetings that are really required by law when we have students who are transitioning into our system from the Department of Juvenile Justice or the Department of Human Resources, students who are in de facto custody, who have been in trouble. But we've taken this a step further and provided case management meetings for students who come into our system from other school systems who have discipline problems. That's not a requirement, but that's something that our school system has put in place so that we can review the discipline of those students who enter our system, and if there is a problem, they won't transition straight into our regular school system or regular school setting or the traditional setting, but they'll start out on a probationary period at the Alpha Academy, and of course at the end of their first semester or at the end of their stint, then we'll review their discipline, their academics at the Alpha Academy and determine whether or not they're ready to transition into the normal school setting. So this is a filtering process for us to make sure that those students are placed in the right setting. Of course, this information is a committee decision. It's not one person's decision, and the home school administration is invited to those meetings to help assist us in making that decision. And of course, our Alpha Academy, students are assigned there by tribunal or waiver, and you just heard from me that they could be assigned there through case management if necessary. We have ramped up our communication of behavior and academic, behavioral and academic expectations to the students as well as their parents. We're refocusing, just as I said throughout the presentation, on changing the student behavior. What I mean by that is just because we're attempting to eliminate the time limit that students stay at the Alpha Academy. They will be assigned there for a minimum amount of time, but then their case will be reviewed at the end of each semester to determine whether or not they are ready to go back to the traditional setting. And of course, the homeschool, before they transition there, the homeschool will be a part of that decision. Even though the homeschool is part of that decision, that's not the final decision. The recommendation will be made to the superintendent before the transition actually occurs. Any questions on the discipline plan?
Yeah, I've got a question,
Yes,
just
sir.
to fit in there. Over a period of years, I've met a number of people that ask me about what's going on over there in school system. And I haven't found one yet that hadn't asked or indicated, what about uniforms for school uniform? And I tell them, well, they told me that means that means y'all. Well, I think we got a committee, we're studying and everything, and I haven't heard anything in a long time, and I'm still getting the questions. Now, what I tell these people in answer to what I just asked you,
Didn't we do a survey on that, Mr. Superintendent?
We did a survey, and again, I'll have to, quite frankly, Ms. Young, refresh my memory on the end result, as that was some time ago. I think Cindy was part of that and had her base committee or her core committee of parents and participants. But if that's something that the board would like us to bring back as far as information, we certainly can bring that back at a later time, Mr. McKinney.
well, let me
and
ask
just
you a
revisit.
question, because I just figured that. I guess I assumed, and you don't want to assume, I know, that y'all told us about it. You know, if you talk about something, I think you're going to come back and give me the conclusion. It's kind of work.
I think they did.
We did, we had a
Yes.
report on that within the last 2 years, a year and a half.
And the parents didn't want them.
So it's really that old then, okay?
Yeah, but the
Maybe
parents,
that's where I-
if I'm
2
not
years ago, I
mistaken,
probably
Brad,
forgot what happened 2 years ago.
There was strong support for either tightening the standards of the
Right.
dress code that we had that was very weak to begin with, or go to school uniforms. So there was a big preponderance of one of those two options. There was a small of parents that didn't care either way. But I know that we did tighten up the dress code a little bit, I believe, last year, but I thought there was still a large amount of parents that were still uniforms or tightening it up. And a lot of parents could go either way on that one.
Mr. McKinney, the survey results were right around 50% of our student base, or parents, who responded. And so of that 50%, there was around 80% who, like Mr. Smith said, were for some kind of change, whether it was strengthening the current dress code or changing to uniforms, whatever. But overall, there was still only about half who responded. And I think the way Dr. King had reported it was that we would continue to have discussions at the school level, and school communities would have to have that discussion through their PTA, school councils, et cetera, because I don't think there was enough of the entire 16,000 students who responded, to make that kind of change at the time.
Okay. Just so maybe I'm micromanaging. I sometimes think accused of that. Well, I mean, why? So in effect, the decision was made by who? The general public? Who made the decision not to do anything at all?
The superintendent, And it's not doing anything at all. What we did, we had a very focused effort with our high school in particular. Our middle schools were well on their way to tightening their dress code already, but our high schools, I think, is where the problem emanated from, or the perception, whichever you like to perceive it. But at that time, based on survey results, communications with this board, that the superintendent did make a concerted effort and a charge to the high school principals that we would tighten up our dress code, that we would adhere to the code of conduct, because it was spelled out very clearly before and now in the code of conduct how students should dress. And I was going to say this for my end remarks, but I visited every high school. I went into classrooms. I went in first day. I've gone in about 3 times since. I've been generally pleased with what I've seen. Again, young people wear different attire than we would as adults. However, standards of dress, for instance, baggy pants, showing of underwear, those types of things, holes or clothing in ill repair are not acceptable. And I did not see that, and when I did see that, and mainly it was a baggy pants situation, I saw an administrator or a teacher respond to it immediately. So I would certainly invite you. We can certainly go walk through our high schools to see that firsthand, because I've heard the same thing, Mr. McKinney, on my brief few weeks on this job. But I also know that sometimes perception is embellished just a bit, and it's like one person tells another person, and by the time it gets to that last person, it's ripped. So I invite all of you. I will be happy to take you around to our high schools and see the dramatic change in the way these children are dressed, or the way these young people are dressed. I've seen a significant improvement. I would agree with that perception 3 years ago, because I saw it firsthand too. But now you'll see a significant change in our high schools, and that's largely due to what the former superintendent put in place in the charge that he placed upon the high school principals. It's not acceptable anymore to look the other way. We're going to address it, and we're going to deal with it.
Good, thank you.
And on that note, Phil and I went to, we're at Conyers Middle School, which, we got there early. And there was not one child, not one that came in with their pants not where they should have been. There were maybe, what do you think, Phil, 5 of them that didn't have their shirts tucked in properly, but they were stopped at the door and said, you got to tuck your shirt in. And then one young lady came, and my granddaughter is famous for wearing these gosh awful jeans, but the kind that look like they've been shredded, and before she even, in fact, the SRO at the school chased her mother down in the car and said, excuse me, you're going to have to take her home and get her some other pants. So there has been, I think, a severe tightening of it. I do believe that high school is going to try you. I don't care what you do, but at least they are trying a great deal harder. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How is, with the new implementation of last year on the parent involvement of making that parent accountable when that child is gets in trouble, how's that working?
Making the parent accountable?
Oh, yes. Just like you said, the parent has to be notified. They have to come in for a meeting. When the child has been offensive, maybe repeatedly. Do you know how that is actually work? Because that's one of our, in my opinion, one of our most serious problems is parents are not involved. And so when we implemented that for the parents to have to answer, I thought that was one of the greatest things that we could do to change what you're talking about. So, Mr. Superintendent, do you?
Ms. Younts, it all depends on the parent.
I know that.
Well, I know, I'm being serious, because there's certain parents who have different values than others. But certainly it is the onus is on us, and the responsibility is on us to reach out to that parent, to develop relationships with that parent. But there's also a burden on the parent to receive such outreach. Again, we're not out to disengage our students or disengage our parents, but it certainly has to be a partnership. And unfortunately, as General Counsel will attest to, we don't have a lot of leverage when it comes to adults or parents who may be outside, but that does not stop us from our outreach, communication, and making sure that our parents are as informed as possible, and then hopefully giving the right information or enough information, they'll make the appropriate decision. And I will say, the large majority do, and the large majority support our students, support our teachers, and support our schools, but there are some that have different ways of thinking than others, and there's not a lot of leverage we have, but that does not preclude us from continuing to reach out.
Mr. McKinney, there's a legal problem too. We cannot dictate that you have to wear these clothes because the child is entitled to a free public education. And there are people who cannot afford or will not pay for that. And we can't keep them out of the school. If you go to a private school, I can say you will wear these things or you don't come. Public school, you've got another problem. On a positive note, though, we do have and we've been able to provide for uniforms at the Alpha School. So we do have it at the Alpha School, and I think it's yearning to see as a benefit. But when you go to 16,000, it becomes a much more difficult issue in terms of, unless we could come up with a partner who's going to buy all the kids' clothes. Day and age, I don't think it's going to happen. But if anybody knows somebody, we'll certainly talk to them about it.
Mr. Brennan, how many of our, I know several elementary schools have an optional uniform. How many of those?
I know of two.
Chapel and CJ.
And I know that parents are always calling because Mr. Brunswick's first year here, I got called from my son, and he was the one who called me.
Mr. Barksdale was one of our supportive parents.
I have one action item, board policy, JGI. This policy was changed, or there's an addition to the policy. Because the law changed as far as mandatory reporting is concerned. It has been extended to those who volunteer in schools. So we have a plan in place to notify those persons and to provide them with information necessary and sign documentation to verify that they've received it.
As we transition to Mr. Boone's statement, Phil, if you'll just allow me real quick, we have had principal meetings the past 2 days, high school, middle school, and elementary. And on the note that Dr. Brundage was speaking with regards to discipline, climate in our schools, in our classrooms, it was a very clear message from me, directly from me. While I am a strong proponent of loving children, and I'm not afraid to say that, of loving our children, supporting our children, and giving them all the support systems that we can, that Dr. Brundage mentioned, we don't have time for foolishness. And we don't have time, and I don't have time, for disrespect of adults, disrespect of your peers. That's something that I cannot tolerate. I never have tolerated in any level, and I think that's something that our teachers expect and our principals expect when those types of situations come to us. I've mentioned to this board numerous times, it's easy to kick kids out of school. It's hard to keep kids in school. We're going to find a way to keep them in school, but sometimes we may just determine what placement that may be and what placement and support systems are necessary for that child to be successful. So I did want to follow up and close with that for that particular segment. Mr. Boonesy.
Thank you, Superintendent Autry, Chairman Barksdale, and members of the board. Quick update from my division. From School Food Services, we have 4 schools that are involved in the fresh fruit and vegetables. 3 of those are grants we've had in the past, and we were approved to continue, and also we've added Biggs Chapel to that program this year. The school food service team is right now focused on the free and reduced processing that goes on, as you know, and just reminded that the first 30 days school students maintain their status that they had in the last school year. And the renovations that we had, I shared with you last week at our RCA in Flat Shoals, has really helped with efficiency and productivity there, so we're very thankful for that. This is an update on RCA. The roof on the addition is really complete. Spray as fireproofing is going on. Sheet metal studs, I'll have some pictures of these coming up here in a few minutes, are going on, and the brick progressing is moving on. Some miscellaneous things we had, Pine Street Memorial, Salem and Heritage got some new signage at their schools this summer. I shared with you throughout the different sessions this summer some ceilings that were installed. Our principals were sharing their thanks for that in our principals meetings this week, and we're grateful for the team moving forward with that. Sensor controls are working very well. We've added SIMs to that list, and we've replaced some flooring throughout the school system, and just had a good summer, fast summer, but a lot of good things done within the school system, and I thank Bruce and his team for their focus and things rolling for us. The gym at Rockdale, 97% of the block work is complete, 85% of the brick is going on, steel work is completed, and all the concrete is poured at this time except for some sidewalks, that kind of thing going on. Window framework is in progress, metal roof is installed in the gym. That's a big place once you get in there and look around. We're excited about having that gym in progress, and looking forward to them getting the work done and getting out of our way so we can enjoy the kids playing in it. The old gym renovation, the lower level locker room work is at 80%. We've run into some unexpected issues with the construction in there, but as soon as we get the roof dried in, which has been an issue for us, we all know we had air conditioning units sitting on top of those roofs, and now and then we'd have a leak here and there, which interrupt the ball game, but we didn't realize some of the structural damage it had created. So right now we're waiting to get the roof completed so we can move on with flooring and leveling that floor in the old gym, and some needed work there. So they're a little behind on that, but still scheduled to be completed by the end of this calendar year. There's a shot of RCA. As you can see, if I get my, here we go. On this end is our addition, and they're progressing right along fine. These are outside shots of RCA. You see the wall and the siding they're putting on there, steel studs on the inside. Some plumbing that goes on. It's amazing what's behind those walls when you now walk through a building, but this is some of what's there. Here's the Rockdale County High School. There's the new gym. The roof's on it. You see this little area right here is an addition that they're adding on to the old gym, which will be where two of our science labs are, prep work, and there's the work on the rim. Here's the field house that's completed with ROTC downstairs. So progressing right along, and very happy with this. A look inside the gym, hanging the lights. There's a look at the new fencing that we're putting around the field. There's many of you noticed we needed to get that upgraded. And here's the good old roof that we're working on, trying to get things patched up and in place so we don't have to worry about issues down the road. Brick on the outside. We have also painted and refurbished the roofs on the other athletic buildings around the stadium area, so they all will match when we get through. There's a look at the field house with the sod in place. So that's a short update, but we're glad and happy how things are progressing along, and just keep praying the weather keeps out of our way.
Where's the volleyball team practice?
They are practicing at Davis Middle School, and I think over at CJ Hicks some too. I got your email and don't have all those answers yet, but I'll get back with you on that.
Phil, question. I'm a depression baby, and my mama taught me every time I got out of a room, I turn the lights on, and I still do it. And the time I've been on the board, when I'm driving around at night and I see all these lights on, I get I've talked to you a couple times about maybe you could do something about turning lights off when there seems to be nobody there, and you mentioned you were doing something.
We are.
You are. Okay, is that what these sensors were?
Those sensors are indoor sensors that we're talking about there. So if we all walk out of this room, it's going to shut off all the lights and reduce the AC by 2 to 3 degrees, excuse me. Okay. When we walk back in, one of us walks back in, or some action, some motion, and it goes back on. The outside lights are, the ones that you're talking about are ones we have agreements with EMC or Georgia Power, and they are controlling the wattage usage on those. We do have a degree of light that we want to see there at all times for our outside security cameras. So it's a combination of work with those, so.
Okay, one final question. We've added what, some RCA addition and,
Yes.
and we've done a lot of Rockdale
Yes, sir.
High School. How much is that gonna raise our annual electric bill countywide? I mean, was that, it's
I
going,
can give you an estimate on that based on square footage usage compared to what we use in those facilities now, but I don't have that with me.
oh, I just wondered how much it,
It's gonna raise it some.
okay, thank you.
Right.
Bill, you mentioned signage.
Yes.
Now that we've got those ever elusive trees out of the way, when will RCA be getting their road signage?
Dr. Edwards talked to me just this week about it. She's got some designs that she's working with and is bringing to the table to, she wants one of those with the digital signage that goes in there. So she's got some great plans and, but she's got her spot laid out, lined up, and we've got power lined up to get to it as soon as she and her team design what they need. So, you're welcome.
Signs look good though.
Thank
They
you.
really do.
We're making our way around to hopefully all of them, so we'll keep them all up. Thank you, appreciate it.
Good evening, Superintendent Autry, Chairman Barstow, members of the board. The Office of Financial Services has 4 different reports for you, and I'm going to give you a brief update on in addition to that. But let's start with our our contract report. As we mentioned, that's the new thing that was required by our change in our purchasing policy. And this is our contracts under $50,000. We're going to, can you increase that a little? Thank you. We're going to try and make it a little easier by color coding the months so that it shows what we've reported. These are not action items, they're information items, and we've modeled it after what the state of Georgia does. And this is really for information purposes and just so you can see what's going on with our smaller contracts. And it also enables us to have an inventory of all contracts. I know this is a new animal, so do you have any questions?
How many of these contracts will have a life of more than 12 months, say? Or most of them a 12-month period?
Most of them are, especially in this, and a lot of these I think are renewals too, aren't they?
Almost all.
A lot of them are maintenance and renewals where, you know, it might have been something we started in the past and it continues to roll forward. I know my addition this month is the FTE tracker, and we started that, I believe, 2 years ago. And that's actually been something that I feel real good about because for that small investment, it identifies students that aren't counted, so we get additional state fundings because of the usage of that. So I think it's been a really good one.
Marshall, they should be 1 year. If they go through the process, if they're longer, we will have that language in there allowing us to terminate it on December 31st.
I realize that, I just didn't know whether some of these might have been a one-time expense or whether it's annual.
Okay.
Lee, I had emailed you and then left the office, so I didn't get a chance to get a response. I noticed on this, first of all, I'm glad that this information comes to us, but we have 2 areas under credit recovery. And of course, if we were to combine that amount, it'd be over 50,000. Can you explain to us why there are 2 as opposed to 1?
Sure. We did the initial contract, and Gene, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was originally, I believe, at Open Campus. And then we expanded the program, and we've also started the maintenance on the other Darlene. So we have 2 different contracts. They are to the same vendor, and both of those are continuations. I believe the initial one is probably 3 to 4 years old, Gene, is that correct? And the other one, I believe we started maybe the subsequent year and a half, about 18 months after.
And is there a chance of combining the 2 of those
And
in
we
the
talked
future?
about that today. We think we can. It just didn't get caught early enough. We believe that it can be combined.
And then obviously when we do that, we bring it to you guys for action.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One is, how many people can approve a contract less than $50,000? You don't have to be 10, 12, 15?
It's actually, we didn't do a good job of notating on this, Mr. McKinney. It should be a cabinet level person. So for example, the ones that are Grover are really Gene. And I apologize for that. We'll make that correction. But it should only be approved by cabinet level because that's who the superintendent is designated.
The policy says the superintendent or his or her designee, which is, as I understand it, has been the cabinet.
And based on my conversation, Mr. McKinney, with General Counsel and the CFO, I want to make sure we have not only cabinet approval and only cabinet approval, but these contracts also come before cabinet as a whole for our review. But the folks that you see in this room are the only approvers for these types of contracts.
Okay, second question.
Yes, sir.
And no, how many people have to sign that check for the relief?
Superintendent, you give the check or
The
is it a
check-
contract?
The check, or what to pay the people, I mean, you got, $45,905, that's going to be paid to somebody, right? Somebody gonna write a check, who signs the check, is it more than one or two, or what?
The checks are all signed by Mr. Altree. He's the single person that signs it, but it goes through an approval process, Mr. McKinney. The department initiating it will send it to their cabinet level person. They'll approve it, they'll send it to me, and then I approve the funds available, and then Mr. Altree signs the check. So there is an approval process.
I'm sure there was, right?
Yes, sir. Sure, good question.
Now, Lee, on the Coca-Cola item, we actually get $12,000, and it's dispersed among the 3 high schools,
Well, it's actually,
$4,000 apiece?
no. It's, Jim, that's the part that is basically the upfront money, and it's distributed between the superintendent, the 3 high schools, and the 4 middle schools. Now what happens is the schools have the vending machines, they get 100% of the profit, and the schools have a rebate program where any fundraisers or anything like that, they get $1 a case. So all that money, in the past we got more money than that. When you were AD, you probably remember it was a bigger check.
Right.
But what happened is over the last 5 years, we're at about 70% of what we were in 2007. Now, part of that's attributable to stricter guidelines on what they can sell out of the machines.
Sure.
The other part of that is, and actually I was talking to the Coke reps today, we feel like we weren't served quite as well, so they've made a commitment to come back out. They're going to work with the AD people and try and get the sales up so that the schools get more money. And obviously it's a win-win. Coke makes more money, but the school gets more money because of the rebate program and things like that. That doesn't include the money that's going to be going straight to the school. That's through the vending and through the fundraisers.
Okay.
And that runs, through the usually it's the athletic department. Sometimes in elementary schools you'll get where they do the whole school fundraiser, where the 5th grade selling Cokes. Yes, sir.
I want to thank whoever decided to show this type of information. And the reason is, for a new board member, this would help him, he'd learn a lot more about what's going on. It's educational, if nothing else, to know what's going on.
Yes, sir. And it had its roots. Thank you, sir. It had its roots in your objectives for the superintendent. That was one of your objectives, was for us to provide this type of information. So Jack worked very closely with Dee Dee Cottingham, with the purchasing manager, and we devised and modified our policy. And it goes back to a lot of things. We try and be very transparent, and it had roots in you guys asking questions about contracts and things like that. So it's good to have the inventory, and it's good for you guys to know and for the public to know what we're doing.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Moving onward. The grants report. This is our normal grants request.
The year-end?
Yes, just work them across. That'd be good. Thanks, Cindy. You don't have to be formal. You can call me Lee. I don't want to get the big head. This is our normal grant report. You'll see what Tracy did. We have 2 of these. One of these is ending June 30th. It's the culmination of last year and the carry forward grants that have been there. And you'll see that the total for it is is about 6.5 money, the actual funds that were received in that fiscal year, and we inserted that column so you could see both what the total award was, but what we actually got in that fiscal year. That's the 1.257 million, and a lot of these grants, obviously, you've seen over the past 12 months. Are there any questions on this grant report? And it is our normal one. Cindy, if you'll work over towards the next one. Okay, this is Ms. Knutson's current activity. We have a lot of exciting things going on. We are continuing to try and get additional Race to the Top dollars. You see what we've got there, and then we continue to work on that. You'll notice we've put a lot of effort in beginning to really ramp up, and you'll hear more and more about our the new federal Race to the Top dollars, and that's up to $25 million. We're really looking at trying to do some good things. Ms. Knutson's working real hard. We've got a committee working on that. Trying to get, as you know, in the current financial situation we're in, we need every penny we can get. So the more of these we can get, the more we can help serve our students. Can you scroll down, please, Sue? Just keep on going. And then you see that is the start, that rolled also into the July report. And you can see the cumulative grants of 6.5. And in fiscal year 13, we've already received $242,000 of the grant funds that were actually received in this fiscal year. So not too bad in a month and a half. Any questions about any of the grant reports? These are our normal reports. We did change them a little, just hopefully to make it a little bit more understandable. And finally, and you're probably glad it's Lee's final. You see our 10-day report. We've been monitoring this very closely. Rich mentioned the principals meetings the last couple of days. We have talked to the elementary and secondary principals. Leslie and myself will be visiting very soon to be looking at class sizes. You'll see that we've started to see, and I don't know if this is a reflection of maybe the economy really finally is turning or not, but you'll see that for the ninth day, our total count, is 15,636. On the ninth day count last year, we were at 15,384. And that's that number. Sorry, I have to flip between. It's the very bottom number on the second to last. Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, right there. Even better. You can see that 15,000 number. Last year on the 9-day count, it was 15,384. So that's an increase of 251 students. Last year when we looked at these counts, we really lagged behind the 2011 school year. So we think that hopefully that is a sign. The distribution between the different levels is that it's 100 additional high school students over last year, 25 middle school, and 126 elementary students. Cindy, if you'll scroll please to the next page. This is our normal by grade, by elementary school, projection and actuals. And then the next page, again, by school, by grade, middle schools and high schools. We can continue to scroll. Here's the next one is what we really focus a lot on, and this is our class sizes. You'll see throughout the elementary levels the different ratios, student-teacher ratios. I mentioned Leslie and myself will be getting out with the schools and reviewing this and looking if we have to do any staff changes, any moves or posts for any new positions. Hopefully we'll be able to do it by our first goal when we have a class that seems a little over is to try and find a grade in that same school where if we have to move someone, we keep it within the school. Our next choice is if we have a low class in another elementary school, and then obviously our final choice, if we don't have either of those options, is to post and we have to hire. And we are going to ask later on, and I'll mention that later in the action items, the class size waiver that we applied for last year, exact same one as last year. So we'll be getting out real soon. Next page, please, Cindy. And you'll see at the middle schools, we look really pretty good at the middle schools. I was happy when I've seen this numbers. I really don't see any hot spots. And Gene and I will do the same thing with the secondary schools that Leslie and I do with the elementary. We'll be visiting. We do see in the high schools our numbers are a little higher than they have been in the past, but we had some very low numbers, so we're getting a little bit better at that on doing our projections. We're going to be looking at, again, the choices there. Instead of adding a full teacher, we try and minimize it. If we can do it by doing an extended day, that's a lot less expensive, and hopefully any classes that are large, we can do it by adding just one class and not having to add a total teacher. We'll finish up on the 10-day tomorrow, obviously. Then we'll start going out in the schools and visiting. The one thing that we do have to monitor, not just the 10-day count, but see what happens going into next week, because y'all probably are aware that DeKalb starts school next Monday, and usually when they start, we tend to have a little spike. So this isn't, as you're well aware, we'll continue to monitor this with the 20-day counts, and we'll make any adjustments that are necessary throughout the school year. Are there any questions about that?
Lee, is this 137 over at Heritage a correct number? Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
So that'll be an area you're looking at?
Yeah, and if you look at the class size ratios, they're the highest. And we've had some discussions with Greg, and that's, again, Darlene, what we hope is to be able to address that with, if we do have to, we'll address it with trying to do extended days. Now, just in our discussions with Greg already, because, I mean, we have obviously already began to talk to him, I think his core courses, the class sizes there, math, science, English, those tend to be pretty good. A lot of his higher numbers are in his elective classes. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at some of the CTAE courses too. Those are some of the areas that he seems to be a little large or a little high in, so we'll address those. You know, some of those you can have larger class sizes, but still we want to make sure everything's manageable and within state guidelines and our local, additional 3 students. So yes, that'll be obviously the first high school we go to.
Last year, did we have a spike after Labor Day?
Last year, we had a little bit of one, Jim, and that's another spike. Usually it's if we go before DeKalb, after Labor Day, and the last 4 years, our high count has been the 60 or 80 day. Used to be it was a little closer to the 100 day, so it's kind of moved a little earlier in the year, and I don't know why, but probably the last 4 years that high count was the 60 or 80. It's kind of like our tax revenue. It goes like that, spikes about that 60 or 80, then it starts going back down, and by the end of the year the numbers are less. So that's the challenge. We'll continue every 20 days. We'll monitor at cabinet. We'll obviously I can assure you when the class sizes get larger, the principals pick up a phone and call me and their respective cabinet member very quickly. You'll probably find this hard to believe. When it's on the low side, they very rarely pick up a phone and volunteer that position for me to transfer to another school. I'm not sure why it works that way, but it does. Are there any other questions about this?
Do we have any options if, let's say, a student hasn't been in school for the first 60 days?
Mm-hmm.
Are we required to enroll that student?
No, we'll do a withdrawal. Grover will send out a thing. If they haven't been there in the first.
What if it's a transfer?
Oh, I'm sorry, transferring in?
Like from New York.
They come in from
make up a state.
And the 60th day? And what was your question?
My question is, do we have to enroll them?
If they're in our attendance area, I do believe so. Now, the enrolling is probably more of a Garrett question, but I would think we would have to enroll them.
We do have to.
Yeah, as long as they provide the proper documentation they have to that we require from all students, proof of residency.
And they would fall under the same criteria as all the other students that have been there for 60 days.
Yeah, it's like what Rich mentioned earlier, the fact that when we have students that come in, they maybe haven't been with us the full academic year, but, we're still
by law.
Finally, this wasn't on my list, but I did want to give you an update. We did poll the board. We ran an ad in today's paper. We did get the digest information from Dan Ray. We will have a call meeting. I'd hope that we could advertise today and do it next week so we wouldn't have 2 meetings, but Dan assured me that we could not advertise for just 1 week. It had to be a 2-week notice. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to call you guys back, or we're going to have to call you guys back together. That is scheduled for Thursday, August 23rd at 5:30. The digest wasn't quite as low as we'd projected. However, I analyze the collections every year. Just kind of for your information, 2 years ago we collected 100.4% of the digest, and part of that's because of previous years and things of that nature. The year we just closed, we only got 98.6%. Now, one of the percentage points goes to the tax commissioner for collecting the taxes, but that lets you know that really we only collected about 99.6%. When I take the digest for 2012 and multiply it by that same 98.6, it's within $85,000 of what we projected. So I feel good about that. That's good news. The news not so good, I do want to update you. I informed Mr. Autry. He now gets to receive these nice little tidbits that I used to share with Sam and the board. As is often the case, after we adopted our budget this year, the state came to us, and I know y'all always dread these words, the state came to us and informed us that for our health insurance for our certified employees, this year they've determined that for 20 years or longer we've been paying at the end of the month for our certified employees. Now there's no way I know that they can prove it either way, so the short version of this, so that I can end this discussion, is this year we're going to have to pay 13 months of certified insurance for our employees. We're only going to receive funds for 12. So the bottom line is, yeah, I know, that was my look too. The bottom line is we're starting this year $870,000 behind, because that's approximately what it costs for our certified employees for health insurance. I'll continue to obviously monitor that, update y'all as we go along, but unfortunately it appears like community health, I've mentioned over the last few years we've done things like had to pay up front for the first 4 months maybe 22% when it was 18%, and then the last 4 or 5 months of the year we may only pay 2 or 1%. They have a cash flow problem, so I'm afraid that's been passed to the local school systems. Obviously that wasn't just Rockdale, that was all school systems. Ms. Hotchkiss, do you have,
Oh, I have so much to say, but it would not be nice right now. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Superintendent Autry, members of the board, and guests. I'm going to begin with strategic plan. It is different for me to begin with strategic plan. Our superintendent has entrusted me to be our new internal facilitator. Just to let you know, I did go through that training with Dr. Savigny at the time that she went through the training, and have worked very closely with the strategic plan, so yay me, I get strategic plan. So I'm going to give you a little update, and we'll do quarterly updates, but we'll begin with where are we. I know Mr. Autry back in May gave you an update on all of the renewed plan from the mission, the beliefs, and went through every detail and including the action plan. So I'm not going to do that tonight, but I would like to let you know where we're at. The action plans have been assigned. They're assigned to cabinet members and in some cases directors along with the cabinet member. And the action plans have been phased. As you know, it's a 3-phase plan. Generally 12 to 18 months is considered one phase. We have approximately 30 in phase 1, equal amount in phase 2, and only 3 in phase 3. That looks a little off, but keep in mind this is a fluid document. As we roll into phase 1 and find that maybe we cannot get it completed, some things might shift a little bit from phase 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. But that's where we're at. And phase 1 has begun. Phase 1 began July 1st, and everybody's often working very hard in their areas. Our school site-based plans are also underway. And I will like to point out that Loretta Burton will also be continuing on with her role with strategic plan and certainly monitoring our site-based plans and working closely with them as well. Any questions on strategic plan before I move forward? Okay. And I apologize, some of this is cut off, and I think without rebooting that computer, there was no easy solution. But this is our monthly media rollout of what's been in the newspapers, and of course you heard that we had some television coverage because we were the first system in the metro Atlanta area to begin school this year. So we were host to Channel 2 and had a little fame going on with one of our new principals this year. Rolling right onto the first day of school, and I want to thank everybody, board members and cabinet certainly, who make rounds all day, and I don't want to steal any of our superintendent's thunder, but we appreciate that. We know that our staff looks forward to that every year, and certainly our parents, and appreciate us all being out there and welcoming everybody back. We've seen a lot of happy faces. You know, I think I've heard it, if I've heard it once, I've heard it, 5,000 times so far, that this was a great start and probably our best ever, at least since I've been here. This is upcoming events. The annual I Can Do That event, and this is an event from the Chamber Education Committee, who will have a luncheon at Rockdale Career Academy. That's on Tuesday, and that's really to prompt businesses in the area to get involved with education, whether it's through mentoring, internships, apprenticeships, partners in education, academic booster clubs. I mean, you all know we have a whole host of ways that the business community can get involved in education. So this event is kind of an opportunity to bring the two together and give some examples of how businesses can get involved. Parent Academy is, this is just a mark your calendar. The next Parent Academy will be Saturday, September 29th, and we'll give you more information on that as it gets a little closer. And I do want to just update you a little bit on, you're accustomed to hearing about our Highest Aspirations Awards and our Defying the Norm Awards and our Highest Aspirations, or our Superintendent Academic Awards for Rigor. And we did give those out. Last year it was a little bit later in the year because of the retest scores coming back and the timing of that. But we were able to get that information like at the very last minute, and when I say last minute, I really mean last minute, to be able to give these out at a time when we had at least administrators together. You're aware we did not do our Highest Aspirations Assembly and bring all staff together this year, and there were some reasons, timing, budget, for not being able to do that. But we wanted an opportunity to at least show our appreciation to our staff and to our administrators, especially while we had everyone together. And we did this. Again, this slide is showing you our categories. These are our Highest Aspirations Award, our Defying a Norm, and two Defying the Norm Awards. And I want to point out that the thing that's a little bit different this year is because we didn't have the Georgia High School graduation tests for the subjects, we used the end of course test for the tested subjects as the indicator for high schools. I know that's a lot of information, but the results were great. We gave out over 40 awards this year, and I'll just change slides. This is the Academic Rigor Awards. This has to do with advanced placement, and you can see we gave out several awards in these categories as well. Every school got something. Every school achieved one of these categories, at least one of these categories. Something for us to be very proud of. A lot of schools went away with 2, 3 awards. And one thing that Cabinet has always discussed is, we don't back off on the criteria for these awards. We don't make it such that everybody's just automatically getting an award. You have to earn these awards, and that's significant. I do also want to mention that we were able to film this award ceremony, and so our principals could go back to their schools and share that, and share the receipt of their school's award with their staff at their first pre-planning meeting. We did that, again, kind of a last minute, but we had a student who was able to take, well over an hour's worth of footage and edit it to where every school had just the opening and then their portion of the program, so they didn't have to watch everybody. And we're going to recognize that student next week. She's a 9th grader at Heritage, and we're going to recognize her. So I would like to show you just a little clip of one video, if I may, just so you have a taste of what she was able to put together. And I think it was in less than 2 days that she did all of this work and got it to our all of our schools in time for their pre-planned meetings. So a lot of work done on the video. And I'm going to try to drive it from here. I might need to move back over, but I'm going to try to drive from here.
Thank you. I do want to go ahead and get started from the sounds of things outdoors. I think we probably need to expedite our snack time and move into really, quite frankly, one of the best parts of startup, particularly this year, when we celebrate each other. And I want to make sure you understand our perspective. While there are specific schools and specific programs possibly that will get recognized here, everybody and more in this room and outside of this room has contributed in some way to the recognition of our schools and the achievements of our students. So first, before we even get into the plaques and the superintendent's awards, please, if you will, give all of ourselves collectively a round of applause. Meeting or exceeding, look at the data, we know that many of our schools did, and quite frankly, and economically disadvantaged. Okay? If we're ready, Gene, they said I could not walk and talk today. We are videotaping this so that you can take this back to your faculties. We did think it was important, even though financial considerations and also as respect for your time considerations back in your buildings, that we could not afford, with everything we have going on with your teachers coming back, we could not afford the time or the expense to go outside and do our typical startup, even though I'm partial to that because I love to create that first start and that synergy that it brings with our teachers. So we wanted to at least do it collectively here with you guys to get some excitement generated here. And hopefully, if all works well with the video, you can at least take some snippet of your particular celebration or the celebration at large back to your schools. Absolute bar of 90% plus passing the course test and or the Georgia High School graduation writing test. 9th grade lit, 90%. American lit, 90%. Writing, 94%. Heritage High School.
And so forth. So you kind of get an idea of, everyone was given their particular school's awards in a video clip, and we're able to share that. And we had some fabulous feedback from our administrators that was a nice touch for their first meeting. So they were glad to be able to do that. So, any questions? I won't go back to the podium unless anyone has a question for me. Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I'll conclude with my remarks. Many of those have been spoken in context, but I do want to mention Ms. Young requested more detailed school information with regards to our summative assessments. I would like to mention Mr. Marco and her staff completed the academic report. If you'll remember, I used to present this big, I used to call it the academic Bible to you guys in hard copy. This year we decided and our principals agreed that we will provide that electronic version to them. And again, they can print it off as needed. But Mr. Marco, Mr. Baker, I would ask that that be the document that you send to board members. Again, it has every piece of information and detailed specification that you could ever ask for, and we'll make sure that you're provided with that particular document. I won't mention the fact I've already talked a little bit about principals meeting, open houses, curriculum nights. Tonight is another night for our elementary curriculum nights. we've just seen tremendous response from our community and from our parents, and they've gone quite well. I did mention before in giving you my opening assessment of how schools are going. I have visited classrooms. Cindy has alluded to the fact we've gone digital, and I did in my superintendent's video connection to all staff mention the fact that it is by nature and my first love that I go into classrooms and see teaching and learning taking place, and not just watching or supervising. I want to talk with teachers, not to teachers. I want to collaborate, and I had the opportunity to do that in multiple classrooms, particularly at the high school level. I plan to go to middle schools, all middle schools tomorrow. But again, talk with our teachers. I need to actually feel what's happening in that classroom and speak with our teachers directly. So I've had an opportunity to do that. I'm very pleased, like I said, with the appearance of our schools, with the compliance with dress code of our students, but more so the level of engagement that I saw with our teachers. It was day 2, but you couldn't have been able to tell it was day 2. It seemed like it was mid-year. I had many teachers say that it's almost like we never left. Now, that was a positive in that context, but I think also a short summer was probably being alluded to as well. I do want to give public accolades to Mr. Bruce Stewart. The chairman and I had the opportunity to visit firsthand our construction sites on a muddy day, but certainly our construction projects are moving quite along, and really many of those have been expedited. So again, thanks Phil, to you and your staff, and certainly pass that along to Mr. Stewart. At that point in time, this concludes my remarks, Mr. Chair.
We'll take about a 10-minute recess this
Okay,
time.
can I say one thing? Phil, would you please tell Peggy how much we appreciate her? There was a wonderful article about her in the AJC, and I hope everybody got to read it on the board, because it was excellent. So tell her thank you so much.
Wait a second.
Yeah? Please.
Okay, at this time I call the meeting back to order. Next item is review of the July minutes. If everyone would review those and let Ms. Hurd know if any corrections or additions for next week. Does anybody have any discussion of minutes at this time? I see no old business, no new business. Next item is review of action items. The first one is Board Policy BBF Advisory Committee. Mr. Alford.
Superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education adopt the proposed revision to the following policy as presented. BBF Advisory Committees. This is the revision that Mr. Baker mentioned. Is semantics. It's to correct a reference to an old policy. This is the correct policy reference.
Any questions or discussion? Next item is Board Policy JGI, Child Abuse and Neglect. Mr. Alford.
Superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education adopt proposed revisions to the following policies as presented. JGI, Child Abuse or Neglect. JGIR, Child Abuse or Neglect. Georgia law requires mandatory reporting of child abuse and neglect, has been modified to include as mandatory reporters those who serve as volunteers in our schools. Mr. Garrett, Dr. Brundage mentioned that. This is to be in compliance with Georgia law.
Okay, any discussions or questions on this policy?
I have a question. How do you communicate that to the volunteers?
I'll answer this, Garrett, and back me up if you would, but as I mentioned or discussed this, with Dr. Brundage, we're going to provide written notice of all the requirements and detail exactly what is required as a mandated reporter. That's going to be on a permission slip, not a permission slip, but a signature slip, and it will be provided to all volunteers. Dr. Brundage is also asking that all principals gather existing volunteers in their building collectively to go over this new provision and again get them to sign it as new volunteers come into the school.
Any other questions? Okay, next item is Board of Education 2012 Board Meeting Schedule.
Superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education approve an adjustment in the 2012 board meeting schedule. That change would include changing the work session from October 11th to October 18th, and changing the regular session from October 18th to October 25th. So in essence, moving both of those meetings back 1 week. Rationale that at this point in time, due to the fact that the state has required that we have summative assessments given on that first week in October, that required us to change our standard October break, fall break, moving it back 1 week, which of course conflicts with the first work session. So I asked the board, if it pleases the board, that if we could just move it back so that it does not conflict with our staff and our students not being in school that week.
Any questions or comments at this time? Okay, hearing none, next item, Board Annual Training.
Superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education approve the SY13 Board Annual Training Plan. State BOE rule requires specific annual training for all local school board members in Georgia. Each Board of Education must submit their training plans to the DOE by September 1 of this year. This annual training plan identifies the training needs of board members from July 1, 2012 through June 30, 2013. You do have supporting documents. We have included the board training plan, the draft version for your review. Also, we've included the GSBA brochure detailing many of the menu options that are endorsed by GSBA. I would like to point out, board members, that we have identified dates for 2 different trainings that I want to make sure that you're aware of. And again, as you look at this and check your calendars, we want to make sure that this works for the board as a whole. Our whole board training we have scheduled for February 5th, and that will be 2013, not 2012, from 8 to 4. That as a custom, the board is accustomed, we'll combine that with Board Institute along with board training as well. So we'll continue to do that and follow that protocol. New board member training, the orientation, we have scheduled tentatively for September 18th, 2012, and that will be a 3-hour training from 9 to 12. Again, I will contact new board members to make sure, but again, I needed this board to be able to approve this plan before I contacted new board members and made sure these dates were available for them as well.
Any questions, comments at this time? Okay, next item is Finance Personnel.
Superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education approve all personnel recommendations, resignations, and terminations for August 2012 as presented. This is our standard report, and you have the supporting documents with our recommendations.
Okay, any questions or comments? Next item is Financial Fundraiser. Amendment to a board regulation, I think, JKR. Oh, it's in compliance, I'm sorry.
Fundraiser request for first semester. Mr. Chairman, the superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education approve all fundraising requests submitted by each school for the first semester of 2012-13 as presented. And again, as you mentioned, this is to be in compliance with Board Reg JK-R. This is pretty standard for every year.
Any questions or comments at this time?
Lee, do we have one from every school?
Yes, we do. We did have one school that submitted and said they were not going to do any, but it was the Marion School. I think they've really never done one, but they have their foundation. So, yes.
Thanks.
The short answer is we do.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Next item is Finance Resolution.
Superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education adopt the attached class size waiver resolution. This resolution requests a waiver increase to the state maximum class size by 3 students for all schools. This is what Mr. Davis was alluding to as he looked through enrollments. We're requesting a waiver much like we've done over the past, I know the last 2 years, Lee, it may be longer, but again, this is in response to financial emergency created by state cuts and a decrease in the local tax digest.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Autry, teaching and learning.
Superintendent will recommend that the Rockdale County Board of Education approve the Career Technical and Agricultural Education, which is CTAE, local plan application for FY13 as presented. Local school systems receive funds through the Carl D. Perkins Career and Tech Act. This is a revenue stream from the Georgia Department of Education. This is standard operating procedure. We need the board's approval to receive such funds.
Any questions or comments?
The report as a whole is not listed here, and I know in the past we've always received that. Is that because it's relatively a new point, has it not changed any?
Well, there have been some modifications. You've always received the summary report, but I can have Roger provide you with he's got it right here, and provide you with a very thick document for your review if you would like.
It seemed ours was larger than just this one page of financials, but no, I really don't need more paper, thank you.
Again, this is income, and certainly Roger's done a great job over the years getting those plans approved, but we'll be happy to provide all the level of detail you desire.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Do I hear a motion to have an omnibus motion or consent agenda for items 1 through 8?
So moved.
Second. Have a motion by Mr. Smith, second by Ms. Young to have an omnibus motion for action items 1 through 8 or a consent agenda. All those in favor, raise your hand. 7-4 and none opposed. We have no board discussion. Do I hear a motion to go into executive session for personnel?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Young, second by Ms. Smith, go into executive session for personnel. All those in favor, raise your hand. Stand.